Joining us first, Iranian author and journalist Amir Ahmadi Arian, co-host of Global Power Shifts and national security analyst and journalist Suzanne Kianpour, and Dubai-based reporter Inzamam Rashid. We're going to start with you, Inzamam, because you have some breaking news out of Dubai regarding the U.S. consulate.
Yeah, let me give you an update on that. It has now been confirmed that the U.S. consulate in Dubai, in Al Seif, the diplomatic enclave in Dubai, was targeted by an Iranian drone. That drone was intercepted by UAE military systems, which intercepted that drone. But as a result, some debris and shrapnel fell down to the ground in the vicinity of the U.S. consulate, causing a pretty large explosion there. A lot of fire, a lot of smoke has been billowing out of the consulate for the last hour and a half or so, and we've now had it confirmed that that U.S. consulate in Dubai has been targeted by an Iranian drone. Now, it was my understanding that that consulate had been cleared of all diplomatic staff. They had evacuated the consulate over the last day or day and a half or so, following advice from the US. But clearly, this is now a signal from Iran targeting not only the military assets in the region, but also embassies and consulates. We saw earlier today the U.S. embassy in Riyadh was targeted. Again, debris falling down in the area and causing damage and destruction to the U.S. embassy in Riyadh. We know the embassy in Kuwait has been targeted as well. And now this evening, the U.S. consulate in Dubai has been targeted by a drone from Iran. Debris has fallen from that drone after the UAE missile systems intercepted it, and that debris has caused a minor explosion, some fire, smoke in that vicinity. The Dubai media office tonight confirming that. They've said that Dubai has succeeded in extinguishing a limited fire in the vicinity of the US consulate in Dubai, resulting from a drone targeting operation. They said that this incident did not result in any injuries, which would make sense given that consulate had been evacuated of diplomatic staff. However, this is a significant moment because we've seen a number of attacks coming into Dubai and Abu Dhabi over the last few days, ever since this war began, when the US and Israel joint struck Iran. And ever since then, Iran has been targeting the Gulf states, as we know. Here in Dubai, we've seen a number of attacks, and this now is the latest, a targeted attack to the US consulate, which has seen some disruption and destruction due to debris falling down from that drone.
What are these drone strikes doing to the Arab nations across the Mideast, including there in the UAE?
Well, they're hugely impactful. We've seen hundreds and hundreds of Iranian drones flying into the Gulf, targeting various assets. Yesterday and early on today, we saw a huge targeting of energy and oil facilities across the Gulf, here in the UAE as well, some actually hitting and causing damage and destruction. But also beyond the drones, a number of drones, there have also been ballistic missiles, those weapons flying into the UAE as well, and so and the wider Gulf. And so the Gulf has been on high alert over the last few days, and those military defense mechanisms have been working overtime over the last few days to intercept a lot of these missiles and drones. We know fighter jets have been up in the air, particularly the UAE telling us today, the Ministry of Defense, that they've had to combat with some of these drones and weapons with fighter jets in the air, shooting them down. It's been a heavy operation for many of the Gulf states, especially here in the UAE. I think the big question is how did some debris manage to come out of this drone and fall directly at the US consulate. Of course, that would have been the target by Iran, knowing full well as well that there weren't any embassy or diplomatic staff, consulate general staff inside the consulate at the time. But this is a big moment because it does give us a signal of the direction that Iran wants to go into, firstly with Saudi Arabia and Riyadh, then Kuwait, and now the consulate here in Dubai.
Yeah, so you have those three nations who are in this war, regardless of whether they wanted to be a part of it or not, having to take defensive stances within their own countries. You told me earlier that the UAE was sending a delegation to Israel. What is your understanding about the likelihood or the desire, or I guess the inevitability, of these Gulf nations not only getting involved defensively, but also getting involved on the attack within Iran?
Katy, look, we know the UAE has a very open relationship with Israel. It has done probably the only Gulf state which has got a strong relationship as the UAE does. So yes, there was a high-level delegation that landed in Tel Aviv this evening. It's my understanding, and I think what will be the conversation there? Most probably to ask Israel to potentially back down some, so the Iranian strikes also back down here to the UAE and the wider Gulf. But there will also be discussions around Lebanon. Of course, that is a big point in this war now that's emerged over the last 36 hours. I think they'll discuss defense capabilities. Obviously, there's been a lot of cooperation around defense capabilities. We saw France saying that they were ready to step up and get involved today as well. So I think that will be on the agenda, and coordination around defense capabilities. And then I think there's three scenarios that they will potentially be discussing between the UAE and Israel. Who's going to be in power in Iran, and how are Israel going to deal with that? And what will the Gulf nations do in response to that? What about regime change? If that happens, then how will they respond to that? And also regime collapse, which will probably be seen as a bit of a Pandora's box. And I think that's the main conversation that the UAE delegation, a senior delegation, will be having tonight with Israel in Tel Aviv. But obviously, I'm sure this will now be on the agenda as well, this Iranian strike to the Consulate General in Dubai. Yes, no staff were there. We believe they had evacuated, but the shrapnel, the debris from the drone that Iran launched and was intercepted by the UAE defense mechanisms, causing damage, causing fire and huge plumes of smoke at that consulate in Dubai.
Yeah, and last time this happened, last time the U.S. struck Iran, Iran had to strike back. They gave a heads up to the nations they were launching attacks on. I believe it was Doha. They gave a heads up saying these strikes were coming. That does not appear to be the case this go around. Obviously, it's escalating much faster and much more violently. Suzanne, we have this desire, as we just did at the top of the show, to compare it to things that have happened in the past, because we can't see the future. We can only see the past and draw our lessons from that. But given this moment, given Iran, how it's currently made up, given the restive population, given the fact that they are dragging in the rest of the region into this conflict, and Donald Trump's unpredictability, I'll put it that way, how does that potentially change our thinking about this? How should it change our thinking about this?
So until a few months ago, I was living in Dubai, and I have to say, quite frankly, I am actually shocked at what we're seeing, because there is a lot of Iranian regime money in Dubai. And so we always sort of figured that they wouldn't necessarily shoot themselves in the foot. And now that we've seen them attack Dubai, I mean, attacking Dubai is attacking the world. It's a city that's 90% expat, and they've hit civilian targets. And so that's a key takeaway that we need to think about. And I think it really shows that there is desperation, and they're signaling, if we're going down, everybody else is going down with us. At the start of the year, when I saw the massacre against the protesters, killing tens of thousands of people in a span of 48 hours, and remember, it started out really because of the currency collapse and just not being able to have running water, make ends meet, feed themselves, electricity. You know, it did truly start out economically and then evolved into, you know what, actually, we don't want this regime. There have been elements of that, of course, for some time. Again, we saw that in 2022 with the Women Life Freedom movement and the anti-compulsory hijab protests. And so their reaction has really been a tell in that they recognize that they are at the end of the road. And I think a lot of people are asking me kind of what am I hearing from inside, from my sources inside. I mean, I'm now getting intermittent messages because they are really cracking down and throttling the internet. But you brought up Iraq. A lot of people have been concerned about this becoming another Iraq. It's very important to distinguish that these are two very different populations. They are Persians, and it's a different culture, and the kind of religious element is not as widespread in Iran as the Islamic Republic would like everyone else to think. You know, it's about 20% of the country supports the Islamic Republic. And in fact, this forced religion has turned much of the younger population against religion as a whole. And so what I've been told is that on the ground, there is so much rage that when there is a sort of green light from the Americans, Trump, so to speak, saying, you know what, okay, we have done everything that we can in terms of neutralizing the IRGC threat, neutralizing the military warehouses and weapons and whatnot, it's go time, then they will pour into the streets, and I was told they will take care of the regime with their bare hands, quote unquote. And so that's the sentiments on the inside, but we're not going to see people pouring into the streets if they think bombs are going to be dropping. So
yeah, that's a good
again,
point.
how is the message going to get to them? Well, if they don't have the internet. We have already seen state TV being hacked and Trump's message being broadcast via state TV. So I anticipate that probably being something that is part of the calculation.
So how much further do these strikes need to go, Amir, to give people the runway to take over? The IRGC is very powerful, it is armed, and they have shown themselves willing to just slaughter tens of thousands of Iranians. There's also local security forces. What needs to happen to give the Iranian people a chance? And just would the Iranian people even want that from the United States?
Yes, they would want that at this point. That's what I've been told. In fact,
Amir, can I let you jump in as well?
Sorry. I don't see a direct correspondence between the intensity of the strikes and the will into the street. You know, I can draw from on my own experience. I grew up in the in the 80s during the Iran-Iraq War, very close to the Iraqi border. My mom was a nurse in hospitals during that war. So we got bombed pretty much all the time for 8 years. And one thing that I learned from that experience is that as soon as the bombs start to fall, your survival instinct kicks in and overwhelms everything else, overwhelms all of your desires, all your discontent and everything else. And, you just go around, try to take shelter, try to provide food and water for your family. Launching some sort of a political movement and going out and taking over a government building is the last thing on anybody's mind. So at the very least, if we want to see any sort of political movement on the ground in Iran, the strikes need to stop. But even after that, given the scale of devastation that we have seen so far, I'm really worried that once the bombing stops and the U.S. and Israel leave, if that happens, then then the burden would be put on ordinary Iranians out on the street to go out and take over. And if they fail, which they probably will, because they're not armed, they're not organized, and they're going to be extremely traumatized by this intense bombing, then Trump will blame them. Will be like, I did everything I could for you. Why didn't you finish the job? So there are a lot of I think the psychological element of that, the kind of the destructive impact of a bombing campaign on a society should not be underestimated in our analysis.
Let's bring in Jamil Jaffer. He's the founder and executive director of the National Security Institute and former senior counsel to the House Intel Committee. Jamil, jump into this conversation. What's your opinion?
Well, Katie, I think Amir's right. The regime isn't popular amongst the people of Iran. It polls anywhere from 50% against the regime to up to 72% who believe that there should be separation of church and state in Iran. So the regime is not popular, but of course the challenge is, where points out, will they be able to rise up? Will it be effective? That's the hard part. They clearly don't want this regime. The regime has not benefited them, and the real question is what comes next.
Yeah, certainly. We're all trying to look into a crystal ball and to figure it out, but it's very, very much unclear. Suzanne, it's always really great to have you. Thank you for joining us.